Just bear with us. We have a question come in online. Joe, do you have it?
Yeah, sorry, it's Joe here. Just monitoring the online interaction. So a question came in here online. Well, it's actually two questions. What is the current position? Can a company cover its position with a modal form agreement? So essentially, they're looking to understand maybe a bit about the modal form agreements. And the second question is, if data is sliced and distributed over a number of locations, does it cease to become personal data under the EU definition? Therefore, no legal restrictions arise.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay, I'm going to get the easy one in that case. I can support you on the second question if you want. Model form agreements are produced by the European Union in order to facilitate European companies to export their personal data outside of the EU jurisdiction. And as I said, it's one of 4 or 5 ways in which you can export personal data outside of the European Economic Area. And it's arguably the cheapest and most practical way. So a simple example would be an Irish company which has been taken over, let's take that example, by a US company, and they want to merge their operations. So there's a database, they want to merge all their databases. So you have a big database of the Irish company's customers and their employee database, comprising lots of sensitive data and important data about employees and about customers. They want to merge that with the US database and host it out of Santa Clara County in California. In order to do that lawfully, what needs to happen is a model form agreement needs to be signed between the US Inc. and the Irish limited company. And as I said, that facilitates the free flow of data between the two. So it sounds like a brilliant concept, and there you go, it gets over the export of data problems. The difficulties arise with model form agreements is if you're in a truly global company that might have 300 or 400 companies in its global structure, all with different roles and data moving globally, it's impractical then for each company to sign a bilateral. They're only bilateral agreements, model form agreements. You could end up with, you can do the math, 300 companies all signing bilateral agreements with each other. It'd be insane. You'd need a huge legal team. So as I said, they're very helpful in very focused bilateral sharing, both intra-group, and it doesn't have to be intra-group, I just use that as an example, but it can go with just any company-to-company sharing. So they are very helpful with limitations. Now, the more difficult question.
Thanks very much. If I understand correctly, the question was whether data, once it's split, i.e. that there's a differentiation made or a split made between, say, the living individual to whom the data relates and then the data elements. Ultimately, we would always come back to the data subject, data controller relationship. And where the data controller controls the access to that data, the use to which it's put, they remain the data controller. They can engage their data processor or third parties to operate on their behalf, but ultimately they retain responsibility, they retain a duty of care for that data. The challenge is always, I suppose, can the data relate back to a living individual? And does the processor or the data controller have the thread, the connectivity from the data item back to the living individual to whom it relates? As long as that exists and as long as there's a continuity there, there needs to be that protection afforded to the data. Depending on the sequences through which it goes, and as Philip was saying, the prevalence, I suppose, in this industry for third and fourth and potentially even fifth party providers through the chain of service provision, then obviously that gets diluted down. But ultimately through the contractual relationships, the thread is still there that relates back to the individual. And as such, the ultimate responsibility still stays with the controller, regardless of the cloud, regardless of the global opportunity, in terms of the jurisdictionality, in terms of the residence, so to speak, of the data items, it still relates back.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think there's a lot of discussion around this point, but I think sometimes it's misconceived. I think invariably the data controller, it may engage in this type of data fragmentation and fragmenting it and encrypting it in such a way that individual strands of data no longer pertain to a particular person. But in so long as the data controller has the cipher or the ability to put together those strands, it remains the data controller and consequently has the full suite of obligations under data protection law. However, that doesn't make the whole issue of data fragmentation fraught or a waste of time. It's still a very important data security tool. So in doing it, the data controller enables itself to comply with its data security obligations to show that it's keeping the data particularly secure. So, as I said, while it doesn't get the data controller off the hook, it shows that the data controller is doing a lot to keep the data which it processes secure. And in fact, it was one of the preconditions of the Google City of LA contract that Google agreed to engage in this type of fragmentation of data. So, yeah, that's that.